Brazilian authorities detained more than 1,000 people in connection to a violent attack on several government buildings in the country's capital over the weekend. Thousands of supporters of the former president, Jair Bolsonaro, stormed Congress and the Supreme Court and the presidential offices. Protesters had been hoping to oust Brazil's newly inaugurated left-wing president from office, claiming the election was stolen. The scenes were similar to the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol that took place nearly 2 years ago to the day. Nomia Iqbal from our partners at the BBC reports from Brazil's capital, Brasilia.
Hundreds of protesters let out their fury and rage on the heart of Brazil's democracy. Supporters of the former President Bolsonaro entered Congress, the Supreme Court and the presidential palace, destroying offices, computers, furniture and taking over government buildings. More than 1,500 people were detained on 40 buses.
The clear-up operation has been going on for quite some time now, and these scenes look hauntingly familiar to the attack that happened on the US Capitol 2 years ago. Many of the protesters here clearly copied some of the tactics used by Donald Trump's supporters. But the crucial difference is this. They didn't try and stop the peaceful transfer of power here in Brasilia, and that's because President Lula da Silva was sworn in last week.
Many hardline protesters are angry, not because Bolsonaro lost, it's because they want Lula, a left-wing veteran politician, back in prison, not in the presidential palace. Many protesters had been setting up camps for weeks, demanding military action, claiming the election was stolen.
I'm here in this totally peaceful demonstration because I don't agree with all the thievery of Lula, the vice president, the Supreme Court and the Superior Electoral Court. We want new elections, clean ballot boxes.
We don't believe that this election was democratic. There are several indications that there was fraud, that there was corruption.
The camps nearby and in other parts of the country have now been removed. President Lula da Silva was blunt. He called the protesters fascists.
All those people who did this will be found and punished. They will realize that democracy guarantees the right to freedom and free speech, but it also demands that people respect the institutions created to strengthen democracy.
He also blames Mr. Bolsonaro for refusing to accept the election result. Mr. Bolsonaro's wife says he is currently in a hospital in the United States, and some US lawmakers are urging President Biden to kick him out. Nomia Iqbal, BBC News for CBS News, Brasilia.
For more on this, Dr. Ryan Berg joins me now. He's the director of the Americas program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Ryan, for American observers, this obviously looks like January 6, 2021. How similar are those? I mean, is that a comparison apt or is it a little too easy? How similar are they?
Well, I think the obvious similarities, John, are there, but I will like to talk about some of the differences and some of the nuances here that I think do make these events not completely analogous. The first is the timing, as the segment that you ran before this just said. There wasn't a discrete moment in time here that protesters were trying to disrupt as a vulnerable point in time for the peaceful transfer of power. Lula's already been in office for about a week. The inauguration happened on the 1st of January, and so that's one of the biggest differences here. The other thing is the role that the protesters expected the military to play. Frustratingly slow to respond in the United States, I think it was clear that once the military, once the armed forces were involved in sweeping the premises, that things were over. Protesters didn't expect the armed forces to all of a sudden come to their side. That was actually the case here in Brazil. You could see videos from yesterday where protesters are waiting around, the armed forces arrive, and they cheer their arrival, thinking that the armed forces are going to sweep them back and their candidate back into power. They were wrong. The armed forces, of course, played the constitutional role that they were meant to play in Brazil. And the third biggest distinction, I would say, between January 6th and January 8th, John, is the fact that everyone was out of town in Brasilia. We didn't have any close calls. We didn't have any moments where, as in the US, you could see senators running down the hallway, missing protesters by mere seconds. The president of Brazil was in Sao Paulo looking after floods that have racked the country. Lawmakers were not in town. Members of the Supreme Court were not in their chambers.
So let me key in on two of those points, Ryan. One is on the question of the the military. Does it surprise you as an observer that the military stayed within their lane, that they held to the Constitution, or was that more of an open question than might have been the case in the U.S.?
To me, John, it didn't surprise me at all. Brazil's armed forces have come a long way since 1985, when Brazil returned to democracy after its military dictatorship. It's a very professional armed forces, probably one of the most professional in the entire region, and has always said, even during the Bolsonaro period, when Bolsonaro was openly referring to the military dictatorship period in very positive terms, that they were going to play their constitutional function. Now, there still is an open question, John, about how many of them may have had advanced knowledge of yesterday's events, may have not acted with as much alacrity as we would have liked them to. We know, for instance, that maybe some of them were on the premises sooner than they took action. And so, why did it take them so long to be able to sweep the premises at the presidential palace, at the Congress, and at the Supreme Court? But by and large, they played their constitutional function. And no, that doesn't surprise me at all, because they are one of the most professional armed forces in the region.
And then you mentioned there was no unifying moment for these riots. And that suggests that there was some organizing principle, some ability to be organized either through social media. And I wondered if you could talk about that, both as an organizing principle, because this is why people look to these kinds of moments and see that it might be contagious in other countries, and also the role that disinformation through social media can play in spreading the kinds of lies that allow riots to form quickly in moments like this.
It's an excellent question, John. And Brazil is an incredibly wired country. Social media is ubiquitous. Many people have their mobile phones as their principal source of access to the internet. And many people get their political news, especially, from multimedia apps like WhatsApp and Telegram and Facebook. And so they have an incredible likelihood to be encountering some kind of disinformation. It's also the source of their ability to organize or mobilize very rapidly and very quickly. Large WhatsApp groups, large Telegram groups, able to bring people together around a particular cause. So while these applications are both a tool for political knowledge and political awareness, they also have some of these drawbacks. I think we've seen that in Brazil, where disinformation in the past 2 election cycles has really been ubiquitous. At one point, we had 2 of the main candidates accusing each other of being cannibals and members of bizarre religious sects. Things really devolved into some really nasty disinformation in the past election, and part of it has to do with the fact that Brazilians are very, very wired as a society and reliant on some of these applications as their principal source of news for political.
And finally, very briefly, Ryan, the question of extradition of Jair Bolsonaro, a lot of lawmakers are calling that he's in Florida at the moment. How does that play out, do you think?
Well, John, there is an extradition treaty between the United States and Brazil. It's been signed for many years. I believe it was signed in the 1960s. But as of right now, the Brazilians are still deciding on what they would like to do with Jair Bolsonaro. He hasn't been formally accused of any crime, and so I think it would be premature to start talking about extradition. It's certainly safe to call this a frustration in the bilateral relations that he happens to be hanging out as a tourist in Florida. It is a frustrating element of the relationship, and it certainly doesn't help us move things forward. But he hasn't been officially accused of a crime. And until we get to that point, it's probably premature to start talking about any extradition process.
All right, Ryan Berg, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks very much for having me, John.